I was born and raised in Ohio, but I've repented and since moved south. You know, I too want to thank the ladies for the excellent job they did in preparing the food, but I was always told not to talk with my mouth full. You know, years ago when I had more than what I have now, I used to give guys a hard time that was losing their hair. I don't do that anymore. I also used to tease older fellas. I don't do that anymore. As I get closer to it, we had a lady in Auburndale, Florida, in the Orange Street Church that would always be the organizer for the senior appreciation dinner every year. And somebody asked her, said, "Well, Sister Libya, how old do you have to be a senior?" She said 2 years older than me. So whenever I get the chance, I always make sure that Jerry Brewer's on one side and John West is on the other. I've got a picture to prove it too. Yeah. Don't worry, pup, your day's coming. Okay. Really, these lectures are so important. And one of the greatest values to this, outside of the spoken and written word itself, is the bibliography that comes along with those lessons. The material that is there is just outstanding as a source for further study. Just a thought. My topic, typology and the court of the temple. Now again, the study of types in the Bible is an important study simply because the Bible itself identifies the existence of types. If for no other reason, that would make it one of the most important, a very important thing to study. Christ has not entered into holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us, Hebrews 9 and verse 24. One writer has said that there are some reasons why caution in this study is important, and this was actually one of the worries that I had, because I'd never really studied types in a formal way. You know, you get dibs and dabs of it in sermons that you preach yourself, and sermons you hear others preach. You might see some reference to it in a book you're reading, but I've never really had material to study in a formal way. First is the extravagant speculations of earlier typologists have left a bad taste for the study in the minds of many. They feel it has been discredited. And that was, I called Michael up and expressed that to him. Secondly, the spirit of religious liberalism has silently assaulted the thinking of some. They thus tend to dismiss the supernatural elements of the Scripture. The supernatural elements of the Scriptures. And since typology relates to prophecy, which is one of the main proofs of the Bible, it has been similarly discarded, because if typology is true and valid, then prophecy is true and valid, and therefore the Bible is in fact the inspired Word of God, the verbal, plenary, inspired Word of God. It has been, the Bible itself, however, makes it quite clear that types are a vital component of Jehovah's redemptive plan. And again, just listening to the brethren in their introductions in almost each of these lessons to define typology and the words that the Scriptures use to discuss it. The Scriptures themselves use to discuss it. Now the obvious solution then is to simply be as careful as possible when seeking meaning in symbols. We have to do that. Obviously, we have to do it with all of Scripture, but certainly when we're looking at symbols. Now, another writer tells us under the heading in studying types, another writer tells us the classification of types. He says this: another thing in the study of types should be borne in mind, namely that a thing in itself, evil, cannot be the type of what is good and pure. Now, again, there's some negative sides of types that illustrates the purity of the antitype itself, but never is an example of a pure and holy situation. It is somewhat difficult to give a satisfactory classification of biblical types, but broadly they may be distributed under three heads. Firstly, personal types, by which are meant those personages of Scripture whose lives and experiences illustrate some principle or truth of redemption. Such are Adam, who is expressly described as the figure of him that was to come, Romans 5:14, Melchizedek, excellent lesson by Brother Moses, Abraham, Aaron, Joseph, Jonah, and so forth. Secondly, historical types, in which are included the great historical events that under providence became striking foreshadowings of good things to come. For example, the deliverance from the bondage of Egypt, excellent. The wilderness journey, again, Christians living in the world, the conquest of Canaan, the call of Abraham, deliverances by the judges, and so forth. Thirdly, then, ritual types such as the altar, the offerings, the priesthood, the tabernacle and its furniture. They are typical persons, places, times, things, actions in the Old Testament. And a reverent study of them leads into a thorough acquaintance with the fullness and the blessedness of the Word of God. Now, the court of the temple, or the outer court, and by the way, out there in the foyer in this particular building, there's a poster that shows a depiction of the temple. And it's interesting when you look at it, and if you consider the types and antitypes, you'll see the altar of burnt offerings, and then you see the laver, and then you see the entrance into the holy place. And when you think about the altar of burnt offerings, which was for sin offerings, and you think about the sacrifice of Christ, then you look at the laver for the purification of the sinner coming to Christ, and then that entering into the holier places for the priesthood. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9, we are that holy priesthood. But the court of the temple, or the outer court, falls under point number 3, being a ritual type and a typical place. Since the Hebrew writer tells us that the tabernacle was a figure from above, we are justified in seeking its meanings. If it is pointed out, then that would be an indicator. I remember going to school when one of my instructors would say, underline this. You'll see that on a test. Here's your sign. Really. If the instructor says, this is important, TQ, test question. You write it down, you underline it, you highlight it. And sure enough, there, when you saw the test, there it would be. The tabernacle and the temple were both divinely planned with accompanying specific commands that the plans for each were to be strictly followed. And I can't help think back to Brother Wayne Blake's lesson on the ark, that if you just varied the instructions one jot or one tittle, he wouldn't have built an ark, he would have built a submarine. And now it was humorous to hear it, but it was extremely pointed in its application. You take a $20 bill, and there are certain identifiers in a $20 bill that the U.S. Treasury puts there to identify a genuine $20 bill. And you could have all of those identifiers except one identifier missing. You would not have a $20 bill. You would have an expensive piece of tissue paper. So when and again with Brother Jensen, his chart, valuable chart, there is a tract that I mentioned to him. It's called the Marks of the New Testament Church. I think that's it. Marks of the New Testament Church. I've seen about 2 different men have their name on that same tract, so I'm not sure who the author of it is. But you unfold it, and it's just an outline of all the marks, identifying characteristics of the New Testament church. Physical illustration. In 1964, my parents bought a brand new Rambler American station wagon. It was bright green paint, the fleck paint and everything, and my sister Joelle and I are sitting in the back seat, and she's putting on her lipstick, and she's sitting in the center, and I'm over here next to the window. And of course, being the dutiful brother that I am, she's putting on her lipstick, and Terry, what do you think I did? Yeah. So, and she says, you don't do that again. Okay. So, sure enough, you do that again, I'm going to put some on you. So, no, you're not. So she's watching, sure enough, and we're fighting over the lipstick. And Mark goes on, I'm telling Mom. That's what God give us sisters for, I guess. So sure enough, I got in trouble and had to try to clean it off, couldn't clean it. 2 years later, I'm sacking groceries at Kroger's. Store 795, Smithville and Fort Kettering, Ohio. And I look out come out in the parking lot, and there's this green Ram. Hey, that just looks like ours. There's only 100,000 of them around Dayton, Ohio. So I walk out and look at this thing, and I'm looking around, and I said, well, okay. And sure enough, there's that lipstick. Well, that was our car. Out of 100,000, the one pulled into our parking lot that was ours. The identifying character, identical to all the rest of them, except for that one little mark. That identified it as our car. So when you look at the identifying characteristics of the temple and the tabernacle and how exacting it had to be, or it would not serve its purpose, all that incense, all those sacrifices, all those hymns being sung would have gotten to the overhead. That's all the effective they would have been. Everything else could have been exactly correct except for one detail. Well, that's awfully strict. Absolutely. Absolutely. It serves its purpose. God wants to find out who is on his side. Now, one of the purposes would be that these structures were to be typical of the original heavenly structure. And in order for them to be valid, it had to be accurate in construction to be factually typical. If it is indeed a type of the antitype, it had to be precise. If the construction was accurate, it would be typical. One could even draw a parallel between the proper construction of the temple and the tabernacle to that of the church. When Jesus said, I will build my church, and just as God gave to Moses the plans for the tabernacle and to David and Solomon the plans of the temple, just so Jesus gave to us the plan, the marks, the identifying characteristics of that which he called my church. Now, why would I want to vary it? Why would I want to change anything? Whether it's in the selection of elders, how we go about selecting or deselecting elders. There is a process for deselecting elders. 1 Timothy 5 and verse 20. That's it. We don't need any more than that. And you can go on down through the worship assembly, you just pick out the topic, get out Brother Brewer's chart, Jess's chart, and you look at that chart and you pick out the thing you want to discuss. Same thing here. First the tabernacle and then the temple were the places in which God was to dwell in the midst of Israel. Do you suppose he wanted his house built just exactly so? The holy place and the Holy of Holies is dealt with in other lectures, will not be addressed here. But for one to get into the holy place in the tabernacle, one had to enter first the outer court, which had the altar of burnt offerings, and then walk past the laver, as I mentioned, to get entry to the holy place. Now these two items were for sin sacrifice and purification, and both were in the outer court. Everything used in service to God must be sanctified by or through blood. Now, let me just suggest something to you. When it comes down to the precision, why don't we have a mechanical instrument of music up here or anyplace else? And it's not because we can't afford one, and it's not because we probably don't have talented musicians able to play those instruments. Why don't we have it? Well, in Ephesians Chapter 5, 19, and Colossians 3, verses 16 and 17, we see the instrument that is to be used to make melody is the heart. Now, why is that significant? Turn your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 10, please. Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 22. And notice what the writer of Hebrews says, almost in passing in a manner of speaking. Let us draw near with a true heart, in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience. Go back to chapter 9 and verse 22. Chapter 9, 22. And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission. Now I would suggest you go back to the last, say, 8, 9 chapters of the book of Exodus, and you run through the first 8 or 10 chapters of the book of Leviticus. And in there you will see the items for the tabernacle that have been donated and manufactured for the tabernacle have been gathered together, and Moses has raised up the tabernacle. He's put it all together and raised it up. All of the instruments are placed in their place. The priests are gathered together. They are clothed, and everything's ready to go. But then you get over into Leviticus, where the sacrifices are starting to be talked about in precision and detail and made, and you find a lot of blood being sprinkled on everything in the tabernacle, everything that is to be used in tabernacle service, everything in the tabernacle itself, the men to be used in service to the tabernacle, the very clothes they're wearing are to be sanctified by blood. There is nothing to be used in tabernacle service or eventually the temple that has not been sanctified by blood. You and I, as members of the royal priesthood, have been sanctified by the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, we are qualified subjects and instruments to be used in service to God. Our hearts have been sprinkled with blood. Therefore, our hearts are the appropriate and only instrument that is to be used in service to God to make music. Therefore, we do not have a baby grand or any kind of other instrument to be used. It cannot be sanctified. Who is foolish enough that has any modicum of intelligence to come before a perfect God unsanctified, much less use an article that is unsanctified in his service? What happened to the king in Babylon when he used an item that had been sanctified in service to another god? He saw the handwriting on the wall, and his knees smote, and his bowels were loosed. A little bit too late. Just one of those thoughts that occurs as you go through these things. The temple, God's dwelling place, the most holy place, typical of the heavenly throne room. The holy place where all sanctified priests could enter was typical of the church. No unsanctified item or person entered into the holy place without dire consequences. Nadab and Abihu, they used unsanctified coals from a place that was not authorized. I mean, think about that. They had a Kingsford briquette. If you want to put it in modern terms, a Kingsford briquette. Instead of getting it from that fire, they got it from this fire. What is the difference? Well, about that much difference and authority from God. What happened? They died. They say that fire is a very painful injury, and I can imagine being burnt to death. Anyways, precision. The courts of the temple. In constructing the temple, Solomon built 2 courts. The inner court, separated from the outer court by 3 rows of huge stone and a row of cedar beams, also called the court of priests, 2 Chronicles 4:9, and an outer court called the great court. And it is in this outer court that we now turn our focus. And by the way, somebody in an earlier lesson talked about the concentric circles. Boy, that's great. I wish I'd known about that before I did my lesson. That's a great idea. The outer wall of the tabernacle and the walls of the temple and the courts serve the purpose of separating the holy from the profane. There's the line. Don't cross that line. Why? You will die. You will be punished greatly. Your death will be imminent. Now, this is a demonstration of a distinction between the sacred and the mundane. It's okay over here, but do not go over there. You are not authorized. John West puts up that yellow tape around a crime scene. Why? You're not allowed to go in there because it's important. There's stuff in there that we need to take care of in an appropriate way. It is the case that the Levitical priests had other priestly duties that took them away from service in the tabernacle or temple. One of the members of the congregation, if you will, has a growth on the wall. Well, let's go get a Levite priest to come down here and take a look at it. So the Levite has to leave the temple to come down to the house to look at whatever it is on the wall to find out if it's in fact leprosy. And there was a whole process for that. So there are things that the Levites had to do. They had to go out into the world to conduct such services. There are things that you and I have to do that we have to do out there in the world. We'll live our lives mostly. But the greater court appears to be typical of the world in which we as members of the royal priesthood live and conduct our daily business. When you pray, where are you when you pray? You know, you don't have to have your eyes closed when you pray. You can be driving down the street offering a prayer to God, especially in some of the traffic that you see around here. You need safety and protection. When you're asking God to bless the food, when you're asking God to bless your family, when you're hearing your children's prayers, when you've been asked as a minister to offer the invocation at some public gathering or other. Not so much anymore, of course, but in times past we'd be asked to do that. That was our priestly duties, if you will. Because as a Christian, now the world looks at us as men of the cloth, but the idea is that there we are carrying out duties that are not, if you will, in the temple proper, as some would look at it. Again, 1 Peter chapter 2, we're members of that royal priesthood. Now, Peter tells us from where we came and what we were not. Again, looking back at Second Peter chapter 2 verses, or First Peter chapter 2 verses 9 and 10, he said, "But ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people, that ye should show forth the praise of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light." People watch us. I had an instructor of mine at School of Preaching, Clarence Lavender. Before he got into full-time preaching work, he was a heavy equipment mechanic. I think he worked for Caterpillar, I think. And he was up underneath one of the tractors, and he was working on a part of the braking system, and he pulled a pin out of one end of this part of the braking system, and he turned around, and it swung out and caught him in the back of the knee, and I guess wrenched his knee in some fashion. So he's in great pain. Now, the folks he worked for knew that he was a preacher. His coveralls, where your name is, they had stitched in their preacher. Ha, 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 here's your, hey, ha, 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 here's your uniform. They're a preacher. So they knew he was a preacher. So Clarence says, "I'm rolling on the floor. I'm in pain. I'm calling for help." One of the guys came up to him later and said he had to apologize to him. Clarence said, "What for?" He said, "I was on the other side of the track listening to you, waiting for you to start cussing." People are listening to us. People are watching what we do. People are watching how we treat our families. My wife and I hold hands. People say, "Oh, isn't that cute?" What, you're holding hands with your wife? Well, yeah, I want to keep her close. That's what I married her for. Keep her nearby. I like her. People watch us. But he goes on, he says, "Which in time past were not a people, but are now the people of God, which had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy." Where were we? We were in darkness. We were lost. We had no hope. We had no expectation of anything. We feared death. By the way, brother, you were talking about death the other day. As I've studied it, I have become, I like to call it, less afraid. I'm still nervous about it. I've not done it. I don't know anybody that has that I can talk to and find out about it. I don't think it hurts. I believe if it does, it'll be just, and I'm not talking about the events leading up to the actual ceremony itself. But if I know that the angels are waiting for me to carry me to the bosom of Abraham, I am certain that when I get there, as Paul said, we'll just think back, what was that all about? Now, I hope that sustains me in that. I'll call you, brother. All right. For some support. We were in darkness, and we're not a people. We did not have mercy. Went to visit a fellow in a hospital bed. One of the members of the congregation, it was her relative of some sort, so I went to visit. I'm going down the hallway of the Winter Haven Hospital, and I see this lady coming out of the room, and I went up and told her who I was and why I was there. And she says, "Well, you can go talk to him." Now, he was dying. He knew he was dying. There's no question, so I wasn't going to reveal anything that he didn't already know. And she says, "I don't think it'll do any good, and besides, he should be asleep." I said, "Why is that?" She said, "Well, 30 minutes ago, they gave him a shot of whatever it was that would knock a horse over." I said, "Well, what's his problem?" "He's afraid of dying. He's afraid of going to sleep because he won't wake up." I thought, no, it's not that bad. So I walked in there, and this man, they had him strapped off so he couldn't do anything. And he was literally shaking that bed. Teeth were gritted. He wasn't in pain. He was just so afraid. That's heartbreaking. When all you have to do is just do what God says to do. And you don't have to worry. I can see you still being nervous about it. I get that. That's just being human. But we don't have to be afraid of it. 1 Corinthians 10:13 said it could well be the relief we're seeking. "However, he called us out of darkness in which we resided and gave us mercy, making us his people." Colossians 1:13 and 14. We've been translated from the power of darkness to the kingdom of his dear Son. We are called by the gospel. 2 Thessalonians 2:13 and 14. But we find here a description of the condition in which people of the world, the great court, find themselves. People are out there looking. We've had some discussions this week about that very thing. How do you find those people? And you know what stuns me is nobody has any better ideas about it than I do. People are just as wondering, how do you reach people that don't care? How do you reach the wayside soil that is just so indifferent? Well, just whatever. Just that's okay for you, but I've got stuff to do. I got to read the newspaper on Sunday morning. I'm getting ready to go fishing or do whatever. I don't know. And then I read my Bible and it just makes my mouth go dry when you think about these folks. But those populating this great court are described by Paul in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11 through 22. They are without Christ and aliens with no hope. They have no hope. The doctor comes to you and says, I'm sorry, the tests have come back and there's nothing more we can do for you. There's no treatment. There's nothing on the horizon that will do you any good. You're just going to go home, get your affairs in order. Hezekiah, it's just all over with for you. There's nothing more. How do you go home? What do you do at that point? How do you handle it at that point? I don't know. Likewise, their understanding is darkened, alienated from the life of God, spiritually ignorant and blind, Ephesians 4 and verse 18. The apostle further informs us of the consequence of such a worldview in Romans chapter 1, 18 through 32. It's not that they don't believe anything when they evict God from their knowledge. They believe everything. Why not? And it's from one thing to another thing to another thing. Why do people get involved with drugs? I remember years back, a young man by the name of Lynn Bias, University of Maryland, a very, very talented basketball player. He gets that contract the night of the day that he gets the contract. A multi-million-dollar contract with a huge upfront signing. Just a check, here's just to get you on board, and we've got more where that came from. He goes, has a cocaine party. Kills him. He's dead. He's dead. Why do they do that? They have no concept of eternity. They have no hope. This is all there is. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. That gets old after a while. I don't know. You can't. That's just beyond me. When one does not have Jehovah, the Lord God, directing his paths, the condition one finds himself in is a rapidly deteriorating situation. The house is on fire, but they don't know nor do they care. And they don't want you to open their eyes. I'm okay. No, you're not. So what do we do as a royal priesthood? What part do we as the royal priesthood play in this outer court? Now Jesus provides us some insights in Matthew chapter 5, 13 through 16. We are the city set on a hill. We are the light on a candlestick. We are salt. I remember Brother Carr once in a class mentioning to us, he said, boys, he said, I don't care how big your army is, how many planes you have, how many ships you have, how many bullets and bombs and missiles you have, how much money you've got in the bank, all that doesn't matter. When God says it's over, it's over. What happened to Babylon? In one night, it was over. It was just over. In one night, that big city with the walls described as big as they were, it was over. Why aren't we over? Because of us. We're so small. That just goes to show you how much strength and power we do have. I used to worry about the church. I'm not worried about the church anymore. I'm still concerned with the brethren, but I'm not worried about the church. The church will always be. But it's what we do with it while we are here with our hands on the handles. Let's not turn around and look back. Our job is the furrow in front of, the field in front of us, to cut that furrow. That's our job. Nobody can put the fire out but us. You realize that nobody else is authorized to preach the truth, that can preach the truth but you and me, but us? They don't have it. And I know I've got friends of mine that may be listening to this. I have no apologies for that. Show me the truth that you have. Let's just put it out here on the table. Let's me and you sit down with an open Bible and we'll examine it. We'll see who has the real deal. I have no fear of that. Now I may have to go back and study, make a few phone calls and come back to give you the right answer, but we'll do it. Done it before, we'll do it some more. That's our job. That's what the royal priesthood does. And at one point, weren't some of the priests, when the boy king was still a boy, weren't some of the priests given shields and spears and told to guard the doors, and anybody comes in, you kill them? We're the guards. We're the ones holding the doorway. We're not going to kill anybody, I don't think, but our job is still to protect. Salt is a preservative, and Christians are to be of such character that we influence the society with which we interact in a righteous way. As light, we show forth truth and reflect Christ to draw people to Christ. I worked at Lockheed Martin in Lakeland, Florida, at their human resources office. They have a big office down southwest of town. And my supervisor was about 35 years old, and Jerry and I had been married about 35 years at that point. She said, 35 years? Yeah, I don't give people that have been married a long time a hard time either. I might poke a little bit of fun, but I don't tease them like that anymore either. But I said, yeah. Now, she'd been married, divorced. She said, how did you do that? I said, well, for me, it goes back to being about 11 years old. Somewhere in there, about 11 years old, I made the decision that when I did get married, I was going to stay married. My parents divorced when I was little, put in a children's home, just, not Oliver Twist with a bowl of gruel or anything like that. I had it pretty good. I'm just simply saying I didn't like what I had. It wasn't what I wanted. And so I told her, I said, first of all, you have to decide you want to stay married. Then you have to realize that you're not allowed to get divorced. That make the right choice the first time. Okay, and as John talked about this morning, Eric and his daughter being married, that's a big deal. But then again, didn't they have a good example? Didn't Lauren watch mom and dad? Didn't my son watch me and his mother as we interacted? My daughter-in-law said, you did good. Yeah. We did, didn't we, honey? She's going, oh, no. You look, turn the pages. Where's that in the outline? As light, we show forth truth and reflect Christ. As a city governed by Christ's law, we draw those that are looking for a life ruled by divine law and order. The religious groups, what I have seen about it, the religious groups that hold a straight and true line are the religious groups that are growing. Now, they're straight and true line as far as their doctrine is concerned. You understand. Now, I've heard brethren say, well, if you do that, you're going to lose members. But somebody was telling us of a congregation that he, the new over, was a part of, that the elders actually started doing their job. And they irritated a bunch of brethren, but a bunch of brethren started coming back. I remember years ago reading in the Gospel Advocate about a congregation up here in the Panhandle somewhere, is east of us from where we are now. This man, the preacher, is a rather young fellow. They started practicing discipline. And they disciplined a couple of brethren that were there. And a whole bunch of brethren that hadn't been there for years came back and repented. I don't know. You draw your own conclusion. But it seems to me if we just follow the rule book, it'll work out pretty well for us. We show the people the practical daily application of truth lived out. How do you do that? Well, you love your wife. Well, first of all, you get a wife that's lovable. I worked out pretty good for me. Our lives are lived on a daily basis in this outer court. Paul said as much to the Corinthian church, that not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out of the world. 1 Corinthians 5 and verse 10. The church is in the world. That's indisputable. I don't know how you argue with that. But the world is not to be in the church. And this goes back to the elders. When we were in Kentucky, one of the young men in the congregation owned a stockyard in an auction for cows, stock. And when an animal was brought in, they had to present a certificate from a veterinarian that animal was disease-free. They would also put that animal in another area to make certain that animal didn't have something that was hidden from the vet, and that animal was in fact disease-free. They quarantined that animal. Now, why would an eldership, somebody walks in and sits down, why would they invite that man to come up and lead a prayer? Why would they, oh, you're a preacher, why'd you come preach for us? Why would you do that? Now, if I'm a pastor over a flock, and we're needing Bible class teachers, now this is just what I would do. And I'd try to influence my elders to do it this way too. I don't care who the person was. Well, I've been in this congregation for 50 years. Sit down, we need to talk. And they'd fill out the same questionnaire that I hand in with my resume to an eldership. Why would I put somebody back here in the room by him or herself without first finding out what they're going to be teaching. Well, I've got the book, I know, but what are you going to say when you teach that book? Because you're having our children back there. You're influencing the next generation. Why would I allow a diseased animal into my flock? Why would I refuse a diseased animal into my flock, but yet some guy just coming in off the street or some family coming in off the street, we just welcome with open arms and not say or do anything about it? Why would we do that? Why do we have the problems we have? We've done that. Let's just don't do that anymore. For what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do not ye judge them that are within? 1 Corinthians 5 and verse 12. Oh, you shouldn't judge. Man, you better be.
Appreciate that lesson. You're right. We better be judging. It's a command that Christ gave us.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that I've never really heard this argument presented in formal way in a debate or anything like that, but I've always wondered, the temple and court and the furnishings, they are representative of something.
Yes, sir.
The brazen laver is representative of baptism. It was put in the court. By what right does anyone have to move that brazen laver from the court and put it in the holy place?
None.
Yet isn't that what denominationalism has done?
Yes, sir.
I think that's an argument that no denominational person can get around. They have moved the brazen laver that's supposed to be in the court, in the world, and tried to put it into the church. And it's wrong and it's sinful. Don't have that right. But they don't have the right for a lot of things that they do. That's why they're denominations and not the Lord's church.
Yes, sir.